Hello and welcome to Avero's channels. Today we're going to talk about enterprise asset management and how it fits into the whole ERP ecosystem. We get this question a lot. We have a lot of maintenance equipment, we have moving parts, we have a utility, we have fleet. When do you do modernization on asset management? When do you do modernization on your maintenance management systems? And how does it fit into your ERP system? That's what we'll talk about today. Now, enterprise asset management is a huge part of your digital transformation, and you can't ignore it. You rely on it to run your operations smoothly. You rely on it to make sure that you have the right material at the right time, the right people working on the right projects. So it's really important to make sure that you don't leave behind that critical aspect of your operation as you're modernizing your enterprise systems. So what is enterprise asset management, right? You talk about EAM, is also called CMMS, which stands for Computerized Maintenance Management System, kind of an old school way of saying EAM. So CMMS is not typically used anymore. We're going to refer to this as enterprise asset management. Now, what are you tracking through enterprise asset management? To me, there's a few things that make up the things that you want to track using an EAM system, right? You have obviously, you have material. The things that you're making, the things that you're selling, the things that you're using to provide services to citizens. Where are they? How much do they cost? Do you have enough of them? Is one thing. It's also known as warehousing, also called as inventory management, right? The next thing that's important is what are your assets? Now, there's a key difference between material, inventory, and assets. Your accountants will tell you that anything over a certain dollar threshold is an asset, right? You might have that codified in your city code, county code, or your organization's codes. It depends on your organization's accounting practices. Generally accepted accounting practices or GASB will tell you specifically how to deal with assets. I'm not an expert at the accounting side of asset management, so go ask your CPA, your accountant, your finance director how you classify assets, right? The difference between assets and material or inventory is that assets don't get consumed. Assets get depreciated, right? You're going to consume inventory. You were talking about gravel, nut bolts, pipes. Depending on what organization you are, inventory is different from assets. Now, you want to track both of them, right? Next thing is your labor. Now, you're going to ask me, what does asset management have to do with labor? You're not selling these assets. You're not selling inventory. You're doing something with it. You're building a road. You're making airplanes fly. You're providing critical services through your utility. You need material and inventory to do that. And who's going to do it? We're not at a point where robots are going to take over completely. But labor is important because labor is going to use inventory to take care of your assets, right? So labor is important. And then what's also important is compliance tracking. How are we using our labor, our inventory, our material to take care of our assets in compliance with the regulations that EPA or your local authorities may have put on you? And lastly, business intelligence. Excuse my handwriting. This is the best I can do. Business intelligence, dashboarding, reporting, you name it. Very important to know what is going on. As a director, as an executive, you rely on business intelligence to tell you how much inventory you have left, what assets need preventative maintenance, what assets are broken, where are you short of labor, how much it's costing you. All of this is critically important. And that brings me to the next point. You have to always keep track of how much money this operation is costing you, right? So cost accounting, because your finance director, your CFO, your budget officer will always want to know how much does it take to deliver these services. So enterprise asset management, yes, it has to do with the nuts and bolts of your operation, but then it gets into the people aspect. It gets into the money aspect. So that's where your enterprise asset management system will interface with your ERP system. And you have to make sure that all of this operation is taking place with these two or three aspects in mind, right? The financial system will want to know how much are you spending on your material, your people, your assets. The other thing that's important to interface is the value of the asset, right? Because as an asset management function within EAM, let's say you are the utilities operations department or the maintenance department, you worry about how well these assets are performing for you. And when I say assets, it could be a building, it could be a water tank, it could be a transformer for an electric utility, or a large vehicle, right? You want to know how well it's performing from an engineering standpoint. Can it do the thing that it was made for? Your financial management will want to know, A, how much this asset costs us to purchase, right? So when you buy an asset, when you write a check for that asset, the financial system will record it as an asset. Remember, I talked about asset value earlier. So when that asset is recorded in your financial system, it has a certain value. Let's just say $100,000. You bought a road roller or a crusher or a bulldozer. That asset cost you 100K. That 100K was recorded in your ERP system as the value of the asset. Now, as you start using the asset and as you start depreciating it, so the financial people will want to know, A, how are you using this asset? What is the useful life of the asset? And what is the depreciation method and schedule to use for the asset? I'm not going to go into an accounting class with you, although that's my background, but there's several depreciation methods, right? Your organization may have its own based on the type and how much you follow GAAP and GASB. So managing assets is a critical element of EAM, and it has two aspects to it: the engineering and the actual function of it, and the financial aspect. What's the value? How much does it depreciate every year? And are we adding stuff to it? Are we adding value to the asset that will increase the value of this asset? Now let's think about a building. You built a building in 1970, it cost you $1 million, but over the years you've depreciated it, but you've also added stuff to it. New HVAC, new windows, fancy new stuff. That adds value to an asset. So the net effect of all of that needs to be recorded in your ERP system. So the next thing we'll talk about is materials or warehousing or inventory, right? How does that interface with ERP? In an ERP system, you have a very specific function called as purchasing, also called as supply chain management. But in terms of governments, purchasing or procurement is a term that's used. Now, why am I talking about purchasing in an EAM video? Remember, if you're a utility or a city or a highway department, you're using stuff to provide services to your citizens. So let's just say you are a highway department, right? What kind of material do you need? I'd say gravel, tar, I don't know. Let's just say gravel. So as you're using your material, you need to make sure that you don't run out. If you're about to run out, you need to let purchasing know that we need more gravel. Back in the day, obviously it happened with a phone call, with a letter, with inter-office mail, where the highway department's director or somebody would call the purchasing department, put in a requisition, and they had to be really good about planning for how much they're using so they don't run out. It's also very critical in things like salt. When you have a snowstorm coming in, you have to be really good at predicting how much you're going to need, right? And that work is managed, by the way, in an EAM system. So purchasing and interfacing with purchasing is very, very critical. So what is the interface between EAM and ERP when it comes to materials management and inventory control? Your enterprise asset management system will have a running count of how much usage there is for a certain thing. I'm just going to say gravel, right? And if you've set it up right, you will have things like minimum order quantity. That means that you need a certain quantity available to you in your warehouses of a certain thing at a given time. Or there's also things called automated reorder points, where when the inventory hits a certain minimum quantity, it triggers a requisition that is directly going into the ERP system. And again, if you've set all of this thing, if you've set this process up right, it's going to be automated, right? You're using your gravel until it hits a certain quantity, and an automated requisition is made to your ERP system that then triggers a, a purchase order or a contract or what have you, right? And now you're talking about going into super detail in ERP. What if the contractor you've been buying it from, their contract's not valid? What if they have to go to RFP again? So all of that is triggered by the automated management of inventory. By the way, it's important to keep things in context. What is enterprise asset management? It is the function that tracks a physical asset or assets from throughout its life cycle, from its inception, from its purchase, from its being put in use, through maintenance, through repairs, through its disposal. And the last piece is critical because when you dispose of an asset, you don't just throw it away into the garbage. You're going to do things like put it out on the internet to sell it to get some value out of it. But as far as the accountants are concerned, the useful life of the asset has been exhausted. They've recovered all the depreciation and they can move on to buying a new asset. So the life cycle of the asset is what an enterprise asset management system manages. What an asset means, how it's managed, what do you consider depreciation, what methods you use. All of those things are unique to your organization and you need to work with finance or your CFO to define all of those things. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is human resources. Again, I'm not trying to confuse you, but human resources plays a huge part in asset management because people are the ones working on the asset. So you need to capture the cost, you need to capture the time and attendance, you need to capture performance while doing those tasks as you use human resources in them. So let's talk about that. I mentioned labor in a previous slide. These are maintenance workers, drivers, engineers, etc. People that work on assets. So let's take a utility, a water utility, for example. If you get a work order through your work order module in your EAM system to repair a certain piece of pipe or the main line, you're going to trigger a task within your EAM system that dictates what needs to happen to this asset, right? So if it is a pipe maintenance issue, you're going to have maintenance workers that need to go to this location, drivers that will take them to the location, inventory managers that will give them the parts they need out of inventory or the warehouse, and engineers that oversee and design the actual work. So there's people involved, right? So when you get a work order, the work order will specify what asset, what work, and what parts it's going to take, and how much it may cost. Because in some organizations, based on what asset you're fixing or repairing or replacing, you're going to charge the cost back to the department that owns it on the accounting books. But let's talk about people, right? How many hours of what skill set is it going to take? That's where your HRIS or your time and attendance system might come in, because A, you need to see who's available on the day that the asset is supposed to be worked on. Like who's available from your crew? Is someone sick? They are on vacation. So you can't assign work to a person that's not there. But how do you know who's not going to be there, right? So this is maintained through your HCM HRIS system, which is a part of your general ERP solution, typically, right? You're going to get that information from your HCM. Availability, sometimes skill sets, and that's primarily it, right? And cost. What does this person cost? The county, city, utility. And that will get, once you assign the work to, let's say, AV gets assigned to dig a hole in the road, you're going to get this information from the HCM into your EAM, and now you know what the labor cost is going to be for doing that specific job, assuming I can do it. It will then roll up, as we've talked about before, into the value of the asset, because it will be rolled off into the cost of the work itself, and that all rolls up to this asset. So managing your human resources, your workforce, is a critical aspect of running an operational department, like utility or a road, highway department. This is key. So if your enterprise asset management system does not interface with an HCM, HRIS, or an ERP system, you're going to have to do this on paper or manually or on Excel, and that is a whole other headache. So when you're designing your systems, make sure that you're not only looking at ERP, standalone, or HCM. You have to think about where these people that are in your HCM are working. A good example is a police department where they have a day job. They're police officers, but they also on weekends or on holidays will help out at a church, at a mall, and to make some extra money. But the police department needs to track this extra work that the officers are doing, and sometimes it's not in an HCM. It's all on paper. It's on Excel. So not very different from the example I just gave you. Asset management, work orders are really important, and to make work orders successful, you have to track labor, inventory, and the costs associated with it. Next, let's talk about why integrate EAM and ERP systems. Right? We've talked about some examples of how it's useful, but it's really critical to nail down the importance of coordinating your EAM and your ERP system implementations so that you're not doing things that will not interface down the road or takes too much time and work and money to interface these things. So as you're designing your systems and your processes, as you're going through phase 0 of your process, it's really critical that you map out how your different components revolve around the core ERP system. Now, we've talked about this a lot on our channels. When you talk about ERP, I'm just going to give you sort of a refresher on what that means, right? It's this enterprise resource planning. The roots of ERP lie in manufacturing, right? It started in Europe. People automated their factories. People made them seamless, automated, and that's what ERP stands for. So from a government standpoint, we don't have the problems of any manufacturing firms, right? But you still need to track several things that either reside in your ERP system. Like there are several ERP systems out there like SAP, Oracle, that are all encompassing. They do it all for you. And then there are others that are best of breed. So assuming you are with an all-in vendor or product, you're going to have several things that are within your ERP. And by the way, even if you are a best of breed shop, it doesn't matter. It all rolls up into an ERP umbrella, right? So you have your general ledger or core financials that includes receivables, payables, all of the things that are important in a financial shop. You have purchasing, you have your HCM or HRIS, human capital management or human resources information systems. And then you have enterprise asset management, and then you have several ancillary systems that not necessarily roll up into an ERP, but they make an ERP better if you have them. And I'm gonna say they're sort of tier 2 systems that you may or may not want to take on as you do an ERP implementation. So some of those are electronic document management systems or electronic content management systems, two different things, but kind of similar. Also videos on both of them. You also have your business intelligence solutions that basically are your reporting tools. Now, as you're implementing an ERP system, a core ERP, you might have a vendor that provides good BI capabilities, but it's really important to know that this in itself can be an implementation, because you really have to think about what you need from your reports and your business intelligence that is not, in a canned report that comes out of the system. So EDMS, ECMS, BI reporting, compliance tools, then you have grants tracking, etc. So there's several other things that make up your ERP system. So we're talking about enterprise asset management here. But you can see how it's important for EAM to interface with your financials, your purchasing, your human resources, document management as you implement this system, because enterprise asset management solutions, they are responsible for creating and managing work orders that sometimes create documents. If not on paper, they'll be PDF documents that you have to maintain for your document retention schedules, etc. Business intelligence is important because that's how executives and management know what's going on in your system. And then you have to comply with things, and that you need a way to track these things. So EAM kind of has tentacles going all different ways. And it's really important that you interface with several critical elements of your enterprise architecture. The first interface I would say that's really critical is into your financial system. Again, this is a recap. Why do you need to interface EAM with finance? Because finance will want to know cost of things. Finance will want to know value of the asset value, inventory value. Because if you've got nuts and bolts and pipes sitting in your warehouse that you haven't used in many years, that's money sitting there without being used. And if you don't have good asset management, if you don't have good inventory management, that becomes a nightmare from an accounting standpoint. And also you run out of room in your warehouse, right? So inventory value is critical to understand. And assuming finance also is overseeing your purchasing function, then your purchasing trends are important. Purchasing needs. Minimum order quantities, when do you place an order, where do you buy from, how much does it cost? All of that's important for finance. Then the next, and I'm going to sort of put a box around what the critical interface points are. The second one is your HCM HRIS solution. Now, why is this important? Labor availability, labor cost, performance management. We didn't talk about that. If I consistently do a horrible job of digging holes in the road, I'm going to get pulled up by HR and have a conversation about my performance. Certifications. People that are working on my assets in my system need to be certified to do certain things. And typically, HCM, your HR department, is the keeper of all educational and training material. All of these things combine to make sure that you're using the right skill sets for the right work within your asset management operation, and that eventually you are reporting all of this back into the finance function, because you want to know, again, what your asset costs you, what it costs to maintain, and what it will cost to replace eventually when the time comes. Okay, next, let's talk about purchasing. This is a critical aspect of enterprise asset management. Remember when we talked about the value of an asset versus the value of inventory? Inventory is consumables. Assets are something that is fixed, that will stay with you for a long time. So purchasing is involved and needs to interface with enterprise asset management simply because enterprise asset management uses things that purchasing buys for them, right? And things that are frequently used, like gravel, bread for your school system, chalk and paint, whatever you need to run your operations, to provide services to the citizens, purchasing department is buying for you. So how will purchasing know when it's time to buy rock for the highway department? Highway department, like I said, could call purchasing and say, we need 10 tons of rock tomorrow. And now everyone's in a jam because you can't just go out and buy 10 tons of rock, I don't think, overnight, right? You need a process to trigger that purchase. You need a process to notify purchasing that a purchase is about to come. And we'll talk about the implications on AI and predictive analytics in the future. But right now we're focused on traditional enterprise asset management and purchasing solutions. So what's really important is when you set up your enterprise asset management processes and systems and purchasing, you are making sure that you're setting the baselines for minimum order quantity. What is the minimum amount of a certain thing that needs to be in your inventory, in your warehouse, for you to feel good about having enough, right? It's like managing your pantry, kind of, right? So minimum order quantity, when do you buy the thing that is needed for a highway department? Trigger points, right? What triggers a requisition? Is it when you hit minimum order quantity? Probably not, because depending on how lean and how just in time you're running your operations, this may not be enough time for you to buy the thing. So analytics and business intelligence is important in this particular point, because that will tell you as you're approaching that point, as you're approaching the point where you need to order things. So you need to define what that is. Okay, the next thing to talk about is when you order the things that the highway department is asking for and they come in, what happens then? You need a way for the purchasing module to notify EAM that your order is here. So it's called receiving, right? And then you can get, again, a deep rabbit hole on three-way matching, where basically you are matching the thing that you order with the invoice you receive with the actual material that you got, and you approve all of that. Then you go into your accounts payables process to pay for the thing that you bought. So really important you integrate inventory management and asset management into your purchasing solutions, or vice versa, especially if you're running a tight shop on lean inventory purchases. Okay, so that was a quick recap, a deep dive into what enterprise asset management means and how it interfaces with your core ERP solutions. And it's important to note again, as you're designing something, as you're buying an enterprise asset management solution, that you take into account the tentacles it has into finance, HR, purchasing, business intelligence, your labor force management. So keep all of that in mind and don't just buy the thing that only manages a piece of your EAM puzzle. The next thing I want to talk about is the future of EAM. I'm fascinated by all things AI, as most of you are. And what is it going to do to enterprise asset management in the future? Traditionally, you had to keep an eye on everything that's going on in your organization. Which assets need to be maintained? When do they need to be retired? What do we need to buy next? Inventory control. As we've talked about, lots of interface points. The future of enterprise asset management through AI is probably going to be easier to manage. Now, you still need to set it up right. You still need to train the AI agents to do the thing that you want it to do in the right way, without triggering unnecessary purchases or without triggering unnecessary repairs on things. So there is ups and downs and pros and cons to what I think the future is going to present to us, but really, AI-enabled asset management is going to be key. AI-enabled asset management is going to be critical in the future, especially when you're tied up with things like Internet of Things, sensors, and various different components of your enterprise asset management machine. All of that will come together to you as a manager, give you a full picture of what is about to happen, what has been happening in your enterprise asset management operations. And the AI-enabled systems will give you recommendations. This is not too far into the future. It's happening today. I've seen some demos that are fascinating to watch from various leading vendors on how they're automating the process of enterprise asset management. To learn more, stay tuned and reach out if you have any questions.